Hi there. Welcome to the From Lab to Launch podcast by Qualio, where we share inspiring stories from the people on the front lines of life sciences. Tune in and leave inspired to bring your life-saving products to the world.
Welcome to another episode of From Lab to Launch by Qualio, where we look at the innovations, teams, and leaders shaping the future of life sciences. I'm Meg, your host, and today we're excited to welcome Dr. Terrance Govender, the VP of Medical Affairs at ClinIntell. ClinIntell, based in Tampa, Florida, supports healthcare executives and leaders in accurately capturing the true severity of their inpatient population using population-based predictive analytics. The results for their customers? More accurate, trustworthy performance data, and clinical condition reporting, all that can be easily shared and used to drive continuous improvement activities. Terrance, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Meg. Excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you today. You've been in your current role for almost a decade. You must enjoy it and feel rewarded by what you do. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to ClinIntell and what you've learned since you've joined?
Yes, of course. It's actually very interesting. So my journey in clinical medicine started off in South Africa and then continued in the UK and then continued even further when you come to the US. And I was never really, how shall I say, I wasn't as driven by the profession of clinical medicine like others were. I did it for different reasons. But eventually I knew that it wasn't going to be something long term. But regardless, when I came to the States, had to take the United States medical licensing exams again. But with the knowledge of that, I really wanted to transition out. I stumbled into the space of clinical documentation improvement because it didn't make sense to me that there was all this, I learned what the DNFB was, and there was all this money being held up because physicians weren't saying what they needed to say. So stumbled upon the space, went into consulting, and then met with our CEO and co-founder Eric Odell at a common client, and here we are since me joining 10 years later, almost to your point. What I've learned, what really drives us all, and particularly me, Meg at ClinIntell, is that we are truly disrupting this clinical documentation space. Not by just adding bells and whistles or bringing to the industry a bit of mousetrap. No, by truly just fundamentally changing the way we do things in this space to evoke a more efficient and process that yields sustainable results for for organizations. It's a space that has not been disrupted, truly disrupted for decades. So ClinIntell allows us to be disruptive in that space. ClinIntell allows us to really carry the torch forward with changing physician documentation practices. And that's very exciting for us here, and specifically me, because it's our daily purpose and goal. And we're the only ones able to do it in the entire industry. So I'm very grateful for the experience and the opportunity.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how traditional clinical documentation processes need disrupting and how ClinIntell makes a difference there in document improvement and integrity?
Yes. So clinical documentation improvement or integrity as an initiative or as an entity in an acute care organization is really geared towards reviewing a medical record and looking for opportunities to improve the specificity on the documentation to get accurate capture, inevitably for clinical conditions. That process of chart review, generating a query, and the physician response to the query has yielded significant severity value for the industry over time, albeit at the cost of physicians answering documentation queries. It works, but there's a few problems with that in the sense that it's not scalable, because if you want to increase the number of or the amount of severity value you're capturing via the CDI program, you're going to have to hire more eyes to put on those charts, which inevitably results in more queries to the physicians, which is never a good thing in the setting of physician burnout. Regardless, if we talk about innovation and the review of that medical record, all of the technologies and the innovations in the space have also been geared towards scouring the medical record, looking for opportunities to find patient severity. And so the entire industry is focused on looking for clinical condition severity in the medical record. And ClinIntell flips the script on that and says, there's only one place you should be looking for severity. It's in the patient, and there's only one person seeing the patient. That's the physician. So let's address the physician. And so that's what we refer to, Meg, what I described with that concept of chart review, generating a query. We refer to that as CDI 1.0. What ClinIntell does by flipping the script is augments 1.0, and we're referencing that as CDI 2.0 because we're including physicians in the equation now.
Terrific. And how do better severity reporting and case mix index strategies help your customers and their patients?
So, patients go to hospital to get care, to get better because they're sick. The level or the severity of their illness is really going to determine a few things. The number of days they stay in hospital, the amount of resources are being used to get them back on track, the physician's professional fees, a whole lot of charges that go along with it. If a patient appears to be not as severely ill as they actually are on the bill or on the medical record, as represented by ICD-10 codes, there's now a disparity between the real world and what's being represented on the claim, and that comes at a cost to the organization. First and foremost, dollars, right? In the early days, and really why CDI, if many may argue with me, but really that's why CDI had started off, is because hospitals were losing so much money, and now it's geared towards those diagnoses that will ensure that they're high severity and we get paid for them. So firstly, there's this huge gap. There's a disparity between the language that physicians speak versus what's necessary for the codes. And in the center sits the CDI program trying to bridge that gap for the language. If there's no bridge between the two, it's extremely costly for the organization from a dollars and reimbursement standpoint. But today, more than ever, Meg, we're talking about risk adjustment, where clinical condition reporting contributes to risk adjustment in many quality performance metrics, like mortality, readmission. All our GPOs use risk adjustment metrics as well. So the need for capturing these diagnoses more accurately and upfront is higher than ever. So it's imperative that hospitals focus on their case mix index and risk adjustment.
Thanks for that explanation. I feel like we're really pulling the curtain back on the relationship between the physicians and payments and care and payments. I think that's maybe not everyone makes those connections when they go to the doctor.
They don't, and it's true because many don't even realize when you get admitted to hospital, there's actually two bills that need to go out, one for the physician's professional services and one for the hospital's resources, which includes nursing staff, etc. It's complicated, but it's necessary to treat patients, and so it's the necessary evil, if you could call it that.
Indeed. Can you share a real world example of how ClinIntell's technology has made a difference?
Yes, of course. We have clients again and again that have given us many, many examples. And really what the ClinIntell data does, and I'll give you a little bit of background on how they use it and how they get the result. What the ClinIntell data does, as opposed to looking for severity in the medical record, ClinIntell will analyze your unique inpatient population and give you population-driven insights. So as opposed to the physician seeing the patient, documenting with their regular documentation habits, and then perhaps the CDI team will catch a severity opportunity, send a query on a diagnosis. The physician has to answer. What if the physician knew for their patient population which clinical conditions they should be looking out for on their patients? And when their patients meet that criteria, they have to call it certain words. Well, that would be the magic formula because it's your 80-20 to get physicians involved. And really what ClinIntell does is it analyzes the population and brings those 80-20 clinical conditions to the forefront for physicians. And then via 2 to 4 minute videos, we bridge that gap in the vernacular between clinicians and the coding world. But we do that in a very clinical way as well, meaning there's no DRG speak, there's no billing speak, there's no case mix index speak. Here's what, at the end of the day, what we're trying to get out of a physician, but the industry has struggled with. The entire industry has been generating queries to get a physician to answer as to whether a patient has a specific clinical condition or not. That is it. But because of all the administrative noise in that query, the physician never leaves that experience saying, I am now better at documenting acute respiratory failure. ClinIntell comes in and says acute respiratory failure is a condition that's being underreported. You need to have a high level of awareness because it has a high prevalence in your population. Assess all your patients, and if they meet the criteria, here are the words you use. Funny enough, Meg, that's what physicians are trained to do. They're trained to assess patients, document what they did, and treat patients. The administrative noise has sort of made it very, very, negative for them. But if you bring them back to the clinical world and if you ask them, does your patient have acute respiratory failure? That is a very reasonable question to ask a physician. And that is the question that the industry has been asking for decades. But the administrative noise has caused physicians for that same question to sit with physicians in a very administrative way. And we're changing that back to the clinical world.
Seems like such an important problem to solve so that physicians can get to the real work of treating the patients.
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
documentation is a thorn in the physician's side, as
Yeah.
the administrative side. But physicians know that they do have to document.
Yeah.
That's why they do it. But what we're trying to do is give them the data that allows them to appreciate that less is actually more in their documentation.
Yeah. Terrance, you've been on an amazing journey at ClinIntell. What inspiration would you give our aspiring life science leaders starting out on their journey?
I would say if you believe in a vision, you have to believe in a vision strong enough to withstand an industry that's going to be a naysayer, an industry that's going to kick you when you're down. The only thing that's going to hold you true is your belief in that vision and taking it over the finish line. We at ClinIntell, I've always believed our algorithms were way ahead of their time. I still believe they're ahead of their time, but the industry is slowly catching up. But if we didn't believe in the vision of being able to change physician documentation practices, we wouldn't be here today. So for all the life science entrepreneurs or other individuals that are listening, I would say if you have a vision, and if you're passionate about something, your vision will come. But if you do have a vision and you believe in it, that's going to be the driving force, even through the worst of times.
Great advice. Can you share a pivotal moment in your company's development where you had to make a tough decision and what the outcome was for you and ClinIntell?
Yeah, no, in the early days in ClinIntell, we had a few early adopters because we're literally taking the industry from a space where they were benchmarking and descriptive statistics was heavily used, or only descriptive statistics was used, and we're introducing predictive analytics into this space. So we had to look for those early adopters, and we had one very large client who a lot of our revenue was, focused in that area. It was very skewed because it was a very large client and a small business. It came to the point where we had to part ways with that client because the client wasn't using, they weren't getting the result, and they weren't getting the result because they weren't using the data the way they should be using the data. And this is another thing about holding true to your vision, because while it hurt us so much from a business standpoint to part with them, it made complete sense retrospectively, because they were never going to get the result because they weren't at that level yet. So it was a tough business decision, but what drove the decision was the vision and the desire to really have the product used the way it was supposed to be used in the market. So probably not what most people would have done, because at the end of the day, you got to keep the doors open. So we're grateful we were able to do that and keep the doors open until.
Yeah, sounds like a tough decision, but like you said, the right one in the end.
Yeah. Mhm.
So thinking into the future, what is the plan for the next, say, 5 years for yourself and ClinIntell? Where would you like to see yourself and the company be?
We are on our way to hospitalists across the country at the very least, or most physicians across the country, knowing what a documentation score is. ClinIntell's metric, the CMI documentation score, is the only metric in the industry that can assess an individual physician's performance on CMI-related severity, as well as now risk-adjusted metrics. So in addition to that, over the next 5 years, We're soon to be releasing some very, very innovative and groundbreaking quality-related data. So essentially, maybe we can go into an organization and tell them, if you're talking about CMS five-star ratings or star ratings, what percentage of the available risk adjustment severity are you reporting, and what's left on the table, and where is it, and how can you capture it? Nobody else can tell an organization that within a couple of seconds just from analyzing their data. So over the next 5 years, our vision is to continue to expand our footprint in the market, because right now the whole concept of being able to change physician documentation practices, people are still skeptical. We have the data, we have the results, and so I'd like to see that grow across the country. We'd also like to see the ClinIntell data being used more aggressively to optimize quality performance metrics from a risk adjustment standpoint. I will be personally satisfied when that goal is achieved, meaning the algorithm is now delivering value at a significant portion of acute care organizations across the country, allowing organizations to address this whole documentation challenge in a far more efficient and sustainable manner.
Yeah, sounds great for patients and physicians, and large organizations too, alike.
Yep.
So lots of winners in solving that problem.
We
Well,
like to think.
Terrance,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I said yes, we agree.
Yeah.
We so
Yeah.
too.
Our last question is more of a fun one. We like to ask each of our guests if we ran into you at a bookstore or at your local library, in what section would we find you?
Oh, that is an interesting one. So you probably find me in the personal development section, and that could range anything from learning about psychology to spirituality to habits of highly successful people. Somewhere along those lines. It wouldn't be in a novel section, but that's where I'd be.
After speaking with you for this last little bit, that doesn't surprise me at all. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Terrance. Where can those go, our listeners go to follow along with your journey and find out more and connect with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. Terrance Govender is the name. Our company, ClinIntell, has a LinkedIn page. We are also clinintel.com is our public-facing website. And of course, the details to contact us are on that website as well.
Terrific. We'll get all of that posted in the show notes. Thanks so much again for joining us today. It was great speaking with you.
Thank you, Meg, for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of From Lab to Launch, brought to you by Qualio. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and give the show a positive review. It really helps us out. For more information about Qualio, our guest today, or to be a guest on a future episode, please refer to the show notes. Until next time.